Okay, I see we have lots of people joining gradually. Thank you everyone for coming today. I'll hand over to Julie, who's going to get started, and people can continue joining.
Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to this MINAGRIS Papillones Stakeholder Forum. We're hosting this today on behalf of the two projects, although my name's Julie Ingram and I represent the MINAGRIS project. These stakeholder forums happen about once every 6 months, and the two projects take it in turns to host these events. We're sister projects, Horizon 2020 projects that have both been looking at the use and impact of agricultural plastics on soil health and on the environment. So today is an opportunity to share some of our findings, to hear some more global updates about the UN Treaty and so on, and more importantly, to get some of your feedback about some of our progress and some questions that we'd like to ask you. These forums are a collection of more high-level international and European stakeholders, policymakers, decision makers, trade bodies, etc. And we really value the opportunity to have a dialogue with you and to have your contributions to our work. So that's setting the scene for the rest of the programme. As Charlotte said, introduce yourself, please, in the chat. And just to remind you, this forum will be recorded. And I believe the recording's already started. If we go to the next slide, Charlotte, please. So here's the programme of the day. As I said, the main aim is to introduce our updates and to get some feedback from you. So we'll start off with a brief introduction to the MINAGRIS project from Esperanza. Then we'll move on to a high-level talk about the UN Treaty, a little bit about developing policy guidelines, a talk about EU soil monitoring from Luc Vernet from Farm Europe, and then conclude talking about guidelines for best available techniques and also a decision support tool, both of which are in the early days of development in the MINAGRIS project. So I think I'll hand over at this point to Esperanza, who represents the MINAGRIS project. Over to you, Esperanza.
Thank you very much, Julie. Good morning, everybody. I'm very glad to be here present and to see that there are several participants, so thank you very much. I will talk over MINAGRIS briefly. Okay, it is an EU project. The next one, please. So why MINAGRIS? This project started because of the problem of plastic contamination in agricultural areas. So as you can see, there are different types of residues of plastics in soil. So the next, please. And once that the plastics are in agricultural areas, they are spread along the system. So as you can see, they can fragment, they can degrade these plastic particles, and they can go to the water bodies that are nearby the agricultural areas, also infiltrate, and also these plastic particles can be ingested by the animals that live there. So invertebrates and vertebrates can ingest these plastic particles. So the agricultural areas are sink and source of plastic pollution. The next, please. Okay, so in the MINAGRIS project, micro and nanoplastics in agricultural soils, we are trying to assess the impact of plastic debris on biodiversity, plant productivity, ecosystem services, transport, and degradation in the environment. So, and we are doing this with a multi-actor approach. So as you can see on the photo, if plastics are present, then they can be spread. The next one, please. Very nice. Thank you. So yes, in the project, we are working in 11 case study sites. So those orange points are the case study sites. And we have also experimental field stations. So in those experimental field stations, we are testing different hypotheses on field conditions after assessing the concentration of plastics that are on the fields. So this is an European project, and you can see the numbers below. It is constituted by 8 work packages, and we have 20 participants in the project. the 20 partners, sorry, in the project. Yes, please, the next one. Okay, just here briefly, what we are doing is, as I mentioned, we are assessing the macro, micro, meso, and microplastics, also nanoplastics. We are trying to understand how they degrade in soil conditions in the terrestrial environment, how they are transported, and then how these plastics affect soil health, soil ecosystem services in different conditions. We have 11 case study sites, how they impact crop production, and also we try to understand how how are the implications on socioeconomic dimensions. And then after, we try to give recommendations. So please, the next one. Okay. The overall objective of MINAGRIS. So we provide tools and recommendations for sustainable use of plastic in agriculture at the farm and field levels for ensuring safe and economically viable food systems in Europe. The next one, please. Okay, so I invite you to go to the website of MINAGRIS. We are already producing papers, and also practical abstracts are very interesting. So you can see papers from what is happening with earthworms with the plastic particles, but also more, policy-oriented papers. So please go to the web page and see what is there, please, and subscribe to the newsletter. Of course, highly recommended. This is the time for ambitious action is now. So this document is going to be described more in this today. So it's over the Global Plastic Treaty. So I recommend you to please read it. Okay, the next one, please. So thank you very much. We are a team. So this was the presentation. So thank you.
Thank you, Esperanza. That's a great introduction. Okay, it's a great pleasure to introduce to you now Dr. Marie-France Dignac, who's a research director at INRAE, and she's also been on the steering committee of the Scientist Coalition for Effective Plastics Treaty. So she's very well placed to give us an update about the progress of the UNEP Plastics Treaty and her role and the role of the scientists there. So great pleasure to hand over to you, Marie-France.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to talk at this workshop. So I will be talking about the negotiation of the plastic treaty and what science tells us about the essential elements that should be in the treaty. And I will start with some general elements about plastics. So the problem with plastics is that plastic economy is a completely linear economy today. First, most of the plastics have a short lifespan, with a large proportion shortly becoming a waste. So in 2019, we produced 460 million tons of plastics and 353 million tons of plastic waste. And most of this waste are landfilled or incinerated or mismanaged and end up in the environment. And only a very small proportion of is collected for recycling. And less than 10% of the total plastic is effectively recycled. Recycled, but most generally downcycled. It means used in a different product because of generally the lower quality of the recycled plastic, and because the variety, toxicity, and concentrations of the chemicals of concerns can increase during the recycling process. And anyway, recycling is a source of pollution, releasing microplastics and toxic substances in the air, in water, in the soil, and it requires a lot of energy and a considerable financial investment. So this situation, next slide, please. In a business as usual scenario, this situation will be more and more dramatic for the environment and for human health, with the production expected to double in 2040, leading to a drastic increase in plastic leakage to the environment. But yeah, the problem with plastic is also that they pollute before they become a waste. They even pollute before they are plastic. Plastic pollute at each stage of their existence, from the extraction of resources used to produce them, which are mainly derived from fossil resources. During the production of the monomers and the polymerization of the polymers, we know that there are high levels of toxic substances such as benzene in the air, soil, or water resources around polymer production sites, with an increased incidence of cancer among local population near the production sites. Pollution is also emitted during the plastic product manufacture, during transport and trade, and chemicals and micro and nanoplastics are released during plastic use. And of course, for the end of life of plastics, it's also a source of pollution, as well as most of the technologies used today to remediate polluted environments. And the problem is with plastic is that they are at the center of the triple planetary crisis. They are a major driver of climate change through greenhouse gas emissions. Today, the plastic sector represents 3.6% of the total emissions, and it's expected to reach 5% in 2040 if nothing is done. And most of these emissions, 75 or 80% of this emission, occur during the production stage of the polymers and the plastic. So again, plastic impact on climate is not a waste problem. It's a full life cycle problem. They also impact biochemical cycles, both in soils and in the ocean, and they are suspected to change the carbon storage, the oceanic pump, and also the carbon dynamic in soils. And they are major driver of the biodiversity crisis, responsible for biodiversity loss in soil as well as in the aquatic ecosystem through disturbance of the habitats and through toxicity for living organisms, including key species, and they are a major driver of pollution during their full life cycle. And awareness of this threat of plastics led to the adoption in March 2022 at the United Nations Environment Assembly's 5.2 of a resolution, the resolution 514. This resolution was adopted by 175 countries, deciding to work towards an international legally binding instrument to end plastic pollution in all environments, water, soil, and air, taking into account the full life cycle of plastics. An international intergovernmental negotiating committee was created, INC, and 5 meetings of this committee were planned with the objective to have a treaty by the end of 2024. So we are at the end of 2024 and we don't have a treaty. We will discuss that later. But it's crucial that the treaty is based on robust independent science. And now there is no science policy interface associated with this negotiation. And next slide, please. That's why scientists from all over the world initiated an international mobilization and created the Scientist Coalition for an Effective Plastic Treaty in November 2022. We are now more than 400 scientists from more than 60 countries. It's independent scientists with expertise on plastic pollution in many disciplines, chemistry, biology, but also social sciences, politics, or economy. And all members have signed a declaration of interest. The coalition has a strong policy in terms of conflict of interest, especially with the plastic and petrochemical industry. The coalition is organized in working groups that evolved according to the need of information for the negotiation. And before INC5, we worked in 4 working groups on human health impacts of plastics, on and microplastics, chemicals of concern, and sustainable production and consumption of plastics. These working groups produce synthesis of the state of science, published in policy brief on various subjects. You can access the published document via this QR code. Next slide, please. And scientists of the coalition also attend INCs to make independent science available to all stakeholders involved in the negotiation. So in Busan 2 weeks ago, for INC 5, we were 70 scientists present. And while attending the INC meeting, we meet the delegations and help negotiators base their position on independent and robust scientific facts. And we are also here to respond to countries when they use arguments that do not conform with science. Next slide, please. So before NC5, we published a list of priorities that, according to science, are necessary to have in the treaty if we want to effectively end plastic pollution and protect human health and the environment. So we need an ambitious and legally binding treaty. First, with provision on reduction of production of primary plastic polymers, but also with criteria to eliminate non-essential plastics and use of the essentiality concept. So this will guarantee the use of essential function of plastic for health, safety, and society, but will eliminate progressively eliminate items considered non-essential. The other priorities relate to the regulation of plastic chemicals and of micro and nanoplastics, and to the implementation of a science policy interface without conflict of interest. So next, please. So the first priority, production reduction. It says critical because it will be impossible to reduce the quantity of plastics entering the environment without upstream measures. This is what all the scientific models show, and also the model of OECD. And also because all waste treatment processes, recycling, landfill, or incineration have an impact on the environment and on human health, and present risk of leakage into the environment. So we need to start by drastically reducing the production and consumption of plastics, then reuse, refill, repair plastic objects to prevent them from becoming waste according to the waste hierarchy. And only production reduction will allow to stay within the safe operating space of planetary boundaries, because before they become a waste, plastic have already many impacts on different planetary boundaries. We've seen like climate or biodiversity. And reducing plastic pollution will also enable the transition towards circular economy by increasing the price of primary plastic and polymers, and stimulating innovation and resulting in the manufacture of longer lasting products. Second priority, next slide, please. It's about plastic chemicals. So in a recent report, Plastchem report, showed that 16,000 chemicals have been identified in plastics, additives, plasticizers, chemicals used or produced indirectly during the production of polymers and plastic products, impurities. And among this chemical cocktail, 25% are known to be hazardous. They include non-endocrine disruptors, carcinogen, and mutagens. And what makes the situation even worse is that most of the chemicals are not tested or not tested sufficiently before used in plastics. This report also shows that 10,000 of plastic chemicals have no hazard data available, and only less than 6% are regulated worldwide. So the chemical complexity of plastics is well known, and the lack of accessible data on their composition makes them impossible to manage safely and sustainably. Also, it's well established the hazard of plastic chemicals, with 15 groups of chemicals identified in the Plastchem report as particularly of concern. So to efficiently protect human health and the environment, science shows that it is necessary to regulate these groups of chemicals of concern comprehensively and to promote transparency and simplification to enable a circular economy. But science shows also that it will not be sufficient to regulate chemicals of concern only in specific products, because exposures occur from many products and also from exposure to environmental pollution. For example, banning chemicals of concern in toys to protect children, it's a good idea, but it will not protect them from prenatal exposures, which is a particularly sensitive period for child development. And science also shows that if we adopt a risk approach with the need to evaluate exposure for many harmful chemicals, it will generate high administrative costs for monitoring and control all these chemicals in plastic products. And such an approach will be very difficult to implement, especially in low and middle income countries. So today, it appears that a hazard approach based on a precautionary principle is the only way to efficiently protect human health and the environment. Concerning human health, the Scientist Coalition also published a policy brief on the impact of plastics on human health. And robust scientific evidence clearly shows that chemicals of concern in plastics have a harmful effect on health, even at low levels of exposure. Plastic chemicals have been identified in human blood, amniotic fluid, and urine, with a detrimental health effect, even at very low levels. They induce reproductive and developmental disorders, including decrease of fertility and infertility. They are involved in diseases such as obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and many cancers. And from an economic point of view, the Endocrine Society estimated human health costs of plastic chemicals at $250 billion per year in the US alone, which is probably an underestimation. So this has also to be taken into account in the real cost of plastic. And there are also emerging evidence of health hazard for micro and nanoplastics. They are present in the natural environment, in the air, in the food, in drinks, and they lead to what is well established for now is that they lead to physical and functional damages in different tissues and organs. There is robust evidence of gut damage, microbiome alteration, inflammatory and immune responses. And they can also induce hazardous effects through the chemicals they contain, and that they can be leached from microplastics, and through the environmental toxicants that they adsorb, such as persistent organic pollutants or metals. Next, please. About the plastic alternatives, we have also a policy brief showing that replacing one plastic material with another can lead to regrettable choices. So, for example, the so-called biodegradable plastics have an impact on the environment. They contain chemicals of concern. There is micro and nanoplastics. They are made of fossil carbon, so they have an impact on climate, and they are often only biodegradable under industrial composting conditions with the need of specific collection system, and they do not always degrade in the environment. So we have to be aware of these limitations to avoid regrettable solution and only use alternative plastics for essential use when no plastic alternatives are available. Next, please. So you can also find these priorities also in the scientist declarations that was released before 1995 and that have been signed by more than 1,000 scientists. Next, so to going back to the treaty negotiation, so several texts have been published since the zero draft published after INC 2, the revised zero draft after INC 3, and after INC 4 we had a text compilation of more than 70 pages with a lot of brackets for articles and text on which countries did not agree. So the INC chair, the ambassador Luis Vallas, proposed a new text in a non-paper that was the basis of negotiations at INC5. And at the end of INC5, we have a shared text that will be negotiated at INC 5.2. So at the end of 2024, we don't have a treaty, and as was planned in the resolution 514, and this can be seen as a failure of the negotiations. But next, please. During INC5, we've seen a strong leadership of ambitious countries, even more ambitious and more countries than in the High Ambition Coalition, gathering 65 countries. At INC5, 85 countries joined the Rwanda Declaration on a commitment to a comprehensive and ambitious treaty. 100 countries supported the proposal of Panama on production reduction, which is really a significant progress. And 95 countries were behind Mexico's proposal on the regulation of chemicals of concern in plastics. So INC5 was for the first time, I think, in the negotiation when the large majority of countries called for a collective action for an ambition treaty. And this was significant progress, I think. Next. So now INC 5.2 will be reconvened in 2025. We don't know yet when and where. And at INC 5, we've seen only a limited number of countries are opposed to an ambitious treaty, mainly countries with fossil fuel extraction and plastic production activities. And we've also seen that many countries base their position on robust independent science. So independent scientists will continue to alert on the harmful effect of plastics with no conflict of interest. They just want to ensure that future generations have access to a healthy and sustainable environment, which is a fundamental human right. So I think on an optimistic note, I think there is hope that there will be an ambitious plastics treaty in 2025. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. That's nice to end on a positive note. Does anybody have any questions at this point? I've got one to start things off. I noticed in some of your policy briefs, there was a reference to a just transition. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about that, Marie-France.
Yes, so just transition will be to consider all the people involved in the economy of plastics, also the informal economy, for example, the waste pickers, who are present as stakeholders in the negotiations, also to concerning the financial part, to implement financial mechanisms that are just for all the countries, also for the low-income countries. So we have a policy brief on that aspect. It is not my really.
No.
I cannot tell you more precisely, but this is something we also take into account, and that sustainable consumption and production of plastics must take into account the environmental aspects, but also the social and economic aspect of the plastic economy.
Great, thank you. Well, the policy briefs look, or the briefs that you produce look really a good resource. And is there consensus amongst science on certain issues, or is that an area that's still being debated?
With the scientist coalition, the 400 scientists involved, we really publish, the work we publish is really based on the consensus. So if something is still under debate, or for example, the health aspect of microplastics, science is rather new, so it's not consolidated. So this we we just take it with precaution. Otherwise, I think on the impact of plastic on human health, there is a consensus for all the chemicals. Yeah, so at least we try to just publish on what is really established and with a strong, robust science.
Yes.
That's the idea, scientist coalition.
Okay. I wonder if there's anybody else who would like to ask a question.
Yeah, I have one.
Go ahead.
Hello? Yes. Well, a couple of issues. Thanks for the explanation. Was pretty good. And a couple of things. One is the issue of nanoplastics, because I think there is a lack of information, quite a lot, because the measurements are not in place. So we cannot talk too much about that. And that, of course, refers to the human health issue, because I think some scientists are overusing this term. We still are not sure about the effects on human health, because there are so many aspects to be considered. This is one, my comment about the nanoplastic. The second one is about bioplastics or new plastics or eco-friendly plastics. How far is now the development on this? Because I know that PLA and other derivatives there are companies working on that, and in fact there are already corporations. For instance, in Italy, the INAI has bought some small companies to prepare bioplastics. But how far is now the situation? Because I think it's only maybe 2%, 5%, not more than that, I think.
Yeah, thank you for this question. So first, on microplastics, I completely agree with you. There are some strong scientific evidence on gut damage and inflammatory responses on the gut system of human health, for human health, but all the recent articles on microplastic detected in organs, we have to be careful, because analytical methods are really new, and they have to be maybe increase. Yeah, we have to work on this method, because before we can really quantify the microplastics in the human body, and before we can relate this quantification to effects. But we already know some impacts on some organs, and most importantly, we already know the impact of chemicals of concern. So the impact of plastics on human health is well established from this part. But yeah, I agree, for microplastics there need to be an improvement of the methods. Concerning the so-called bioplastics, so in our policy brief, we explain why this term is a bit confusing, because it includes bio-based plastics, so plastics made out of biological resources, which are not necessarily biodegradable, and it also includes biodegradable plastics, which are very often based on fossil carbon resources. So it's a very different plastics that are concerned. And it's, as you say, it's only a very small part of the economy of plastics, only a few %. And we have to be careful also in this new development, because biodegradable plastics necessitate collection infrastructure, which are not present in many countries. So if you use biodegradable plastic just to end them in landfill or in incineration, there is no sense. The sense is if it's collected to be treated in specific infrastructure. And also there maybe we have also to be careful with standard used, because biodegradable plastics are often not biodegradable in all the environments. They are not all biodegradable in the ocean or in soils. So this there is a need for research to really understand the impact of these plastics, the new plastics, and be careful of not replacing unessential use of plastic by this plastic, which have also a lot of environmental impact and impact on human health.
Thank you. Any other questions? It looks like somebody's put a LinkedIn link in the chat to the resources you were talking about, Marie-France. So if you want to check those out, have a look at that link. Of course, if you think about a question later, you can pop it in the post and we might have a chance at the end of the forum to go back to it. So meanwhile, let's go on to our next speaker, Ildiko Heim, who's part of the MINAGRIS project, who's going to talk about her work within the project, conducting a policy review. So I'll hand over to you, Ildiko, to introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you, Julie. Good morning, everyone. I'm Ildiko from Fibel, Austria, and my team here in MINAGRIS is responsible for the sustainable analysis assessment of the microplastic impacts in soil. And further to this, we also want to give a recommendation based on the scientific results of our project to different stakeholders groups. You will see that my colleagues will share with you also recommendation for industry, for farmers, and at the very end of the project, we will put together recommendation, maybe also in form of a policy brief for policymakers, for European policymakers too. Thank you, Charlotte, for this slide then. As Esperanza in the very beginning said already, we have 11 different case study sites all over Europe. And in these case study sites, we organize regional stakeholder forums every year, these so-called workshops every winter. And last winter, we asked all the regional stakeholders, which include also farmers, participating farmers, farmers organizations, advisors, and regional industry, waste management, and so on. So the main question was, what are enablers and hinderers of a more sustainable soil management relating to plastics? And here comes up again the importance of policy, because even here in the regional stakeholder event, we got as answers, next to knowledge sharing and financial incentives, also a supportive legal framework and policy adjustments. And also on the other side, as hindering factors, came up the lack of uniform recycling regulations. This hinders the users, the farmers, also on having a more sustainable soil management. And so we know that we have to deal with the policy parts as well. Next one, please. Yes, here I try to gather some relevant international and European regulations and, of course, voluntary arrangements, which are very important. As our keynote speaker already talked a lot about the UN Plastic Treaty, unfortunately, we were hoping so much to give you good news, but let's keep hoping for next year, and we will see if it will come up to a globally binding agreement. Let's keep fingers crossed. But what already exists, the two standards for plastic mulch film. Why mulch film? This is the most used plastic product, at least in our CSS, among our CSS farmers. And it has also very two standards already. The EN 13655 from 2018, it defines the requirements towards this mulch film, the conventional plastic mulch film, and which is used in agriculture and in horticulture. And very important that these mulch films are intended to be removed from the soil, and that it's not incorporated in the soil, that it doesn't leave any microplastic. This includes films like black mulch film, black and white, and transparent films also. we have to note that the mulch film are considered to a very contaminated plastic, contaminated with soil and vegetal residues, and more than 70% it can be contaminated. Therefore, it makes it very, very hard to remove this contamination and to recycle it correctly. And more are contaminated the thinner films, the less than 25 micrometers thin films. And so that's interesting to know and to handle on this. The other standard is for the biodegradable mulch film. This is the 17033, also from 2018, sorry. And this specifies the requirements for the soil biodegradable mulch films, also used in agriculture and horticulture. And this is intended to biodegrade in the soil without leaving any negative impacts in the soil on the whole environment. This also specifies the test methods, and a very important criteria is that more than 90% of this mulch film has to biodegrade in the topsoil, usually in between 20-28 degrees within 2 years. Yes. And very fresh news that the European Commission took the soil biodegradable mulch films as soil improvers, basically as fertilizers, in the fertilizing products regulation. And it included in the product function category number 3. And this news is just from November last month. So these are some good news. And also wanted to mention some voluntary collection schemes. These are, there are several initiatives in whole Europe. Some are more successful, some are just starting. Here to mention some working ones, good working ones. In Germany, Switzerland, and soon next year in Austria is also a so-called Erde scheme for collecting agricultural plastic. In France, Adivalor is one of the best practices how it works. And in Spain, MAPLA is working. But I know from some initiatives also in the UK and in Italy. So let's hope that these collection schemes get more and more into daily routine. Next, please, Charlotte. Yes, I took a very nice overview from the page of European Bioplastics, which is collecting all the relevant legislations for plastics. In bold, you can see the policy frameworks, such as plastic strategy, bioeconomy strategy, the whole Green Deal, new circular economy action plan, biodiversity strategy, and policy framework for bioplastics just recently. And these are the top level strategies. We can see that the European Commission is also dealing with these bioplastic topics. And there are also some relevant legislations. In normal orange, you can see, as I mentioned again, fertilizing product regulations also is dealing with this topic. And of course, some initiatives, just like the microplastic initiatives, already in focus. Next one, please. Yes, I wanted to show you some examples for unsustainable soil management in plastic relation. For example, on the first picture on the left, you can see burning agri-plastic foil and irrigation systems on field. Unfortunately, it's a common practice still in some countries. And the danger is that it releases hazardous chemicals into the air and to the soil. On the picture in the middle, you can see using the plastic mulch, but very often the farmers only use it for a single season, so basically in a time frame of 3 to 9 months. And if it starts to degrade, then it can cause in the soil microplastic residues, which we know it can have impacts on soil ecosystems. On the right, you can see a tractor which is sharing sewage sludge as a fertilizer. Sewage sludge, sorry, biosolids. It's a nutrient-rich material, but unfortunately also microplastic-rich. On the bottom, these are the non-biodegradable polymer-coated fertilizers and seeds, very nice, colorful, but these also cause, as they stay in the soil, they also cause microplastic contamination in the soil. And one more example, this oxo-degradable plastic pose a risk because they don't come up into the standards of bioplastics. Next one, please. So let's see some regulations which can improve the management of plastics in agriculture. For example, these product bans and restrictions. Yes, we differentiate between regulatory instruments and market-based instruments. Let's see some regulatory instruments. The product bans and restrictions, just mentioned about the polymer-coated fertilizers, that they cause a danger for the soil ecosystem, and therefore in the EU from 2026 it will be restricted, the use. The second example for a ban is this oxo-degradable plastic, which release plastic fragments as the degradation is not complete, pose a contamination, and therefore the European Union has banned their use. Next one. Some more regulatory instruments. There are also restriction on agricultural practices. I just mentioned the application of biosolids as fertilizer. It was already restricted because of the heavy metals, 7 heavy metals, if they are found in the biosolids. But as research shows, biosolids, these byproduct of wastewater, it contains a lot of microplastic. So it's better not to use as fertilizer, or at least be aware of the danger. Plastic substitute and plastic alternatives. We differentiate in other materials like paper or hemp mulch, which we know already, which biodegrade and which are nature-based nature-based materials, and the biodegradable plastic mulch. And why these are good? At least they can help reduce the off-site management of plastic waste, and of course cutting microplastic pollution. Product design and standards, we have to think already from the design point on of the consequences. As I mentioned already before, the very thin plastic mulch are the most contaminated, and they also release the most microplastic because they are very thin. When they collect, it is more, when they will be collected, it is more difficult to completely collect them from the soil. So therefore the EU has a proposal to have a standard with at least 25 micrometer on plastic mulch. Next one, please. Yes, and some market-based instruments, so the market is regulating. There exists already some EPR schemes. This is the extended producer responsibility, such as collection schemes I mentioned. This can be already also voluntary and or mandatory. These disposal fees can be in, for example, in the point of trade, sales points, or the deposit return schemes when there's a deposit fee placed on the product. Also, another instrument are taxes and fees. For example, could be a higher tax on the plastic products, conventional plastic products, and a lower tax on alternative products be placed. Then environmental cross-compliance, maybe not everyone is aware of this, but this is like there's some environmental conditions have to be met before getting some subsidies, and this is from 23. And plastic credits could be also an instrument, just like on the example of carbon credit. So to have credits and certificates that represent the offset of plastic footprint of the business. So you can buy these credits, these certificates. And hopefully this causes also less of generation of plastic waste. Okay, that's all for the instruments. And if you go further, Charlotte, then we would like to invite to join and participate actively in our Mentimeter questionnaire. So if you have your mobile phone or even a laptop, you can go or choosing this QR code, or go just on menti.com, putting this code, these 8 numbers on it, and you will get some warm-up questions in the beginning. Just a second, I will share my screen. I hope you all can get in. Seems like already 8 people are participating. If you have some troubles, just put a question in chat or say it on the microphone, but it seems it should be working. This question is just to have an idea about with which background our audience today is here, which is good to see that researchers are here, but also some farmer organizations and policymakers are represented, and students. Maybe some more answers. 17 people answered. Yes, they are coming. Thank you. Maybe the last 10 seconds to get some more answers. Okay, because there are some more questions. The next one is again just a warm-up question. I hope you can see on your phone the next question already. Oh, there are already some answers. Nice. Okay, let's wait for some more seconds that everyone can catch up. And great. And we are here from different countries. Very nice. Let's go to the next question. I already see that some of you already answered. So the question is, which factors shape success or failure? So basically the effectiveness of a policy instrument. Should it be a regulation or voluntary instrument for agri-plastics in your country? If you think of these factors, what do you think, what is important for the successfulness of instrument? Or what factor does play a role? I will leave you here a little bit more time. Some more people who would like to answer. Of course, there's always a possibility to skip a question. Nice. Changing all with every answer a little bit, the graph. Okay, last 10 seconds to wait. It looks like the knowledge and effective dissemination is very important. And that unbiased or biased information available. And of course, the cost of implementation. Okay, thank you very much. Let's go to our last question of this part. These are open-ended questions, so feel free to put in a word or a whole sentence or some words. Please provide examples of any best practices for regulations or policy instruments or voluntary arrangements related to agri-plastics. It helps us to go on if you also can explain why does this work well. You can think of it for a second. Oops, sorry. Very nice. We received already from 12 people an answer. Last 10 seconds to wait to enter your answers. Thank you very much. And you might see some other questions, but we will go on to this later on in other presentation. Thank you very much for your attention and your active participation. And Charlotte, I will give back to you the screen.
Many thanks, Ildiko. Maybe you could just tell us briefly how you're going to use that information you've just collected.
Yes, we will have this data analyzed. We also ask similar questions in our regional stakeholder workshops and with some international events. And we would like to see participants with different backgrounds, what kind of answer, what do they need, what do they think is a good one from policy instruments, for example, in my case. These we would like to discuss again, maybe in the next workshop with the stakeholders, because I think the best recommendations, also policy recommendations, can be made if it's based on a wide range of stakeholders' opinion. Of course, we deliver in MINAGRIS the scientific base, but it's always important to have this multi-actor approach, as already Esperanza mentioned, and we will analyze it, and it will come up also in one of our publications or reports.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good. Okay, now we're going to move on to our next invited speaker, and we're really delighted to have Luc Vernet, who's the Secretary General of Farm Europe. He's also associated with the Papillon project, which I mentioned we're two sister projects carrying out similar research. And Luc's going to update us on the state of the art with the EU soil monitoring law. So over to you, Luc.
Yes, hello. Thank you, Julie. Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to speak to this stakeholder forum on this topic of EU soil monitoring law. Where are we on this on this law? As you know, we are just finishing 7 months of transition. The previous parliament and the new parliament, we have a new commission. So we are now entering again into a new phase for the European Union. And before entering into the soil monitoring law itself, I would just like to remind you that it's a long way to arrive to the first legislative initiative on soils. The European Union already had a first text on waste. Afterward, we had text on drinking water, habitat, biodiversity, but we only had the first discussion at European level on soil around 2002 and 2006, sorry. So it was really, really recent to have a focus on soil, and I will come back to this on because there are some reasons for that. Please, next slide. So we had the first start of the discussion on the soil was in 2002 with the first general discussion on this. And then Commissioner Potočnik in 2006 presented a strategy on soil protection and a first document, a soil protection framework that was discussed at EU level by the Council in particular. At that time, the European Commission had to withdraw the text because of the sensitivity of the topic for two reasons mainly, I would say. The first one is the principle of subsidiarity, and I it's really specific to EU. So the flags on the slide.
Luc, sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt, and you're coming and going a little bit. I'm just wondering if you could switch your camera off. That might save some bandwidth.
Okay, I try.
All right.
Tell me if it's better now. Yeah, tell me. So those member states consider that soil is better covered at national level than at EU level. That was, they were very reluctant to have some text at EU level. And second element is that indeed at EU level, the diversity of soil is really wide. So, and even when we walk on the farm, we know that the farmers know that they have 3, 4, 5, 6 different types of soil, even in the same fields. So indeed, to have a framework at EU level, it's complex. But however, now we have some real focus on soils at EU level. Next slide, please. And the first element is that clearly there is a consensus, and that was a very important element of the Green Deal that was discussed during the previous mandate, that we need biomass. We need biomass if we want to decarbonize our economy, and that's the goal of the EU, to have a climate neutral economy by 2050. That's the first element, and so we need to have a productive soil in good health. That's the first element. The second element, we also need soil for carbon sequestration. So for all those reasons, finally, the European Commission put forward a soil monitoring directive in 2023. Next slide, please. So it was first discussed initially, no, the previous one, please, in the soil strategy. in 2021, and then we moved to a soil monitoring directive. I give you a bit the timeline until now so that you have the main milestones leading to the discussions that we will have in the coming months now. So it was really at the end of the mandate of the previous commission that the soil monitoring was presented. However, both the European Parliament and the European Council managed to design their position. So we had the position of the Parliament and the position of the Council that was adopted at the end of the previous mandate. And now we are entering the really last phase of the discussion, where the European Council, so the member states and the Parliament, will start negotiations in order to finalize the text and to transform it into a real law. And I will come back to that because clearly this step is very important for our topic when it comes to microplastic. Because as you will see in the next slide, there were many elements in the soil monitoring law that were proposed by the European Commission, but some elements were missing as well. The first elements were a mandatory approach for the member states to create soil districts and to ensure soil monitoring every 5 years on those soil districts in order to have a clear picture of the health of our soil across Europe, and then to put some obligations for our member states to define sustainable practice in order to not only keep soil health, but also improve and restore the condition of our member states. And we had many discussions over the last months on the type of obligations, the relevance of soil districts, the capacity to transfer data and so on at EU level. But one element that's, as Papillon, we were surprised considering the discussions that we had and the result that we had when it comes to the microplastic, is that microplastics were not in the scopes of the proposal of the soil monitoring as tabled initially by the European Commission. And that's the next slide. We had some discussion within Papillon, and we thought that clearly that would be an opportunity for Europe to a unique opportunity for Europe to have a visibility on microplastic pollution at European level, to include
We seem to have lost
and
you.
this would require
You're back.
This would require a few adaptation of the Commission proposal. The first one is indeed to recognize the challenge of microplastic as a political element. The second is to follow not only on substances that pollutes soil, but also on material, and indeed the most important one, to include the monitoring of microplastic in the annex of the directive, so that member states have to follow that. And next slide, please. So, as we see, no provision of nano and microplastic were put in the initial proposal. On the side of the European Council, neither. So it means that in the position of the member states, there's no position related to nano and microplastic. However, the European Parliament introduced this element as an important one in its position, including microplastic in the risks for soil health and underlying the implication for soil fertility. So in the position of the Parliament, there's no threshold for the member states in order to quantify soil health with when it comes to nano and microplastics. However, there is a clear request from the Parliament to have a monitoring of micro and nanoplastic by the member states, including them in the scope of the text and in the annex. So that's where we are in the negotiation, and now the Parliament is ready to re-engage negotiation with the member states. We have seen no progress over the last couple of months under the Hungarian presidency, but we think that under the Polish and the next presidency, the negotiation will be able to start again, and we will be very cautious to follow the discussion and to see how this dimension will be included in the final decision, with the challenge to really have and see this opportunity to have healthy soil as Farm Europe, that's very important for us. We need economic and environmental performant agriculture in order to deliver for Europe and to have efficient agriculture. So I will ask you to switch 2 slides so that I finish with a small advert for a very big event that we are now organizing, and I'm sure that it will take place as a very important moment when it comes to the discussion on soil monitoring, which is our common initiative as well to organize our stakeholder event as Farm Europe and as Papillon, sorry, in Brussels in April, the 8th of April, which will be followed by the Agri-Food Plus conference. And a QR code with a small dinosaur. You can scan it and directly go to register to the event where I hope that we will have a soil monitoring by then. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for the reminder. Charlotte's also put the link in the chat if people want to sign up. We'll have that on the last slide of the day as well, just as a reminder for everybody. Thanks very much, Luc. That was a really useful insight into the process of the policy development there, and good to be updated on it. There's a question in the chat from Joel. Joel, would you like to ask your question of Luc? Do you want to go ahead and you will?
Yes, sure, I can. Hi. Yeah, thanks, Luc, for this overview. My question is, when the EU or when they ask countries to monitor plastic in the soil, do they offer a method or a standard? Because I feel that people that are involved, I think I can speak for us in MINAGRIS, but probably also Papillon and other projects, are facing like the big challenge of how to best measure the microplastic pollution in the soil and how to compare it, because there is no standard method to my knowledge. Is there anything about that?
Absolutely. No, but that's a key question. So indeed, however, I remind first that initially it was not included in the Commission proposal. So there were no methodology. The Parliament proposed to cover nano and microplastic in the scope of the text. So there is a first will when it comes to the policymaker in order to do that. Indeed, the next step would be to put, as you underline, a methodology with a threshold. And for the moment, this has not been included, but it does not mean that it is because it's not included in the text as a next step. The response is no, there is no methodology, but it should be built indeed right after with a proper contamination threshold, because we know that 0 is never 0. So we need to have clear guidance on this point.
Yeah, and I hope then for this point you will follow up on our results and our colleagues from sister projects result, because there will be things about that methodology on how to do it and how to be able to compare this data. So yeah, looking forward. Thank you.
Good. And other burning questions from anybody, from any of the participants? As I said before, you can always add in the chat and we can ask them at the end of the forum if something occurs to you. Okay, thank you, Luc. Thank you very much. We'll move on then to our next speaker. This is a colleague from MINAGRIS, Sara Guerrini. Over to you, Sara. You can explain what this session is about.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. So this section is a very practical session, which is going to present one of the delivery of our project, which is a report on the best available techniques reference document. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So what is supposed to be this BREF? It's a delivery at the end of the project, which will provide evidence-based scientific support for decision-making processes for the use of plastics in agriculture, which we've seen already today. It's a very complex topic. And let's say, the target are especially industry and technical advisor. So this is going to be a very practical document with guidelines, and the aim is to try and reduce the spreading and accumulation of macro and nanoplastics in soils and in the environment altogether. Okay, next slide, please. So how we are approaching this not easy topic. So how this report is going to be built, we have already gathered, but we are still in the process of gathering more technical and scientific references on state-of-art measurements of micro and nanoplastics in soil and quality of soils related to the presence of micro and nanoplastics. We are collecting scientific literature, reports, studies, and also on use of alternative materials in agriculture and the end of life, because we do perceive that the end of life is obviously one of the key factors to, maybe not the only one, but for sure one of the key factors to reduce the possibility of spreading and building up of permanent plastic and material in soils. And then, as Ildiko just presented, it's important to have also a mapping on the regulation, norms and standards and good practices as well, codified good practice for the use and the end of life of plastics in agriculture. This is a work that we've been carrying out on within the project, but obviously I'll warmly ask you to send us more data on literature and reports if you're aware of, because I mean the the quantity of publications are many, and we would really like to be a comprehensive mapping of what exists in order to base our report on, the majority of important data available. So, while we're collecting, we're doing this mapping on existing literature and data, another very important aspect is the stakeholder engagement, like events like today are very important to share ideas, information, and suggestions. So, but together with this, we are preparing a questionnaire, which is not going to be extremely complex, but it's going to be about half an hour questionnaire, which we would like to engage you today to fill in, so to be part of the stakeholders who are going to be part of this questionnaire. So please, at the end of this forum today, if you can just express your willingness to participate to the questionnaire, that would be very, very, very good. And the questionnaire will be, we can organize a call, half an hour call, and compile the questionnaire together, because we think this is the most effective way to gather information and also to better discuss the questions. Okay, next slide. Okay, that's basically what I already presented to you, and the key stakeholder for the questionnaires are listed there. Obviously, the list is not fully comprehensive, but we would like to have stakeholders coming from different areas of expertise, and we would like to hear also the farmers associations, farmers cooperatives, and representative and national collection schemes for plastics, NGOs, industries, commission, institutions. And the main focus of this questionnaire is basically, to define where is the state of art, and if you perceive that the state of art is good enough to represent the status of soils and microplastics, and to map, also thanks to the data we already collected, the use of agri-plastic and the end of life in Europe. The questionnaire is based on the European reality, as the European projects are. And then what you perceive the main risk and bottlenecks to be to be worked on in the use of agri-plastics. And again, the role of legislation. Today, Ildiko already was asking a few questions on that, and then suggesting good practices and alternative materials. I just left my contact there if you're willing to get in touch in order to participate to the questionnaire. So say that we got another small questionnaire today, just to introduce you to our survey. And yes, please, if you could go to Menti, and we can start this questionnaire. We already collected the data on your where you're based on and what is your background. Yeah, and the first question is, to what extent are you aware of information and data about microplastics in European soils? This is that's not a good or bad question. It's just your awareness, level of awareness. How do you feel yourself to be engaged in this topic, knowing that many of you are scientists? I guess the level of awareness is obviously above the normal level of awareness. Okay, so don't be shy. Okay, then the next question. This question is an open question. If where your awareness comes from, basically. So where did you get the data on microplastics in the environment, or if you produce yourself the data? So this would be very useful to know, because we trying to to collect the data, but sometimes it's very difficult to know which are the best sources and the most authoritative sources to use for our questionnaire. Okay. So the next question is, this is a question that we've been discussing internally, as you can imagine, in MINAGRIS. So from your perception, would you say that there's a cause-effect relationship between the use of agri-plastics, in this case, I mean, and microplastics in soil? When I say use of agri-plastics, I mean the use of plastics like mulch films that growers normally use in their practices. So I'm not thinking of the use of external sources, for example, of organic matter, such as compost or sledges. I'm just thinking of the actual plastic items that the growers, the farmers are using. Okay, I see that you're pretty much, okay, we wait. Okay, so I see that the bar is moved towards that there is a cause-effect relationship between the use of agri-plastics and microplastics in soil. Okay. And again, yeah, then based not only on the items, of the plastic items, but also on the other inputs that the grower and farmer can use, which, according to your knowledge, are the main sources of inputs of microplastics in soil. So here I see mulch film, sewage, sludge, plastic mulch. Yeah, we got the others are all. So I'd say the winner is the mulch film or plastic mulch and sludges. Yeah. While all the others are lower. Yeah, on this, I'd say that it would be very useful to have this method, the standard method, to analyze the microplastics and their nature in soil. Okay, again, here we wanted to see because this is something that we're going to analyze in our report. To which extent you agree with the statement that agri-plastic, if properly managed at the end of life, well, are properly managed in your country. At the very beginning, in the first speech, we've seen that around the world, only a small percentage of agri-plastics are properly managed, and but nevertheless in Europe there are EPR schemes and very good schemes working, like Adiva Law, for example. Okay, so it seems that you are more on the strongly disagree than the agree at average, even though there are some peaks towards the highest value. Okay, so generally your perception is that they're not properly managed. Yeah, again, this is another bottleneck that we perceive. So the availability of data on the end of life of agri-plastics. Again, do we know data on the end of life of plastics? As you know, statistics on the end of life of plastics are quite scarce, and they're not probably they're not covering the overall topics. But yeah, okay, so very aware. 4.1. Okay, and finally, how would you improve the end-of-life management of these products? Okay, so reduce recycling and removing taxes, more education and awareness, decrease the amount used. That is basically, it goes very well with the hierarchies of plastics. So reduction is the first way of reducing impacts. Substitution with environmentally biodegradable materials because loss cannot be avoided, which seems very pragmatic. reduce soilage rate, develop more collection points, improvise financial incorporation of recycled content, closed loop. Okay, closed loop. And it is one of the topic that for sure is has been addressed by the Commission. Robust material, extra staff, which is trained and add time as well, equipment, full extract, collection system, infrastructure, collect the plastic material always after. I would say even in a short period of time, because we've seen in many cases that plastics are properly collected and left on the fields waiting to be properly collected. Obligatory producer responsibility by not using plastics. Yeah. And then I don't see the other. Okay, so this was a first test of on our questionnaire, and I think first of all, I thank you for the answer, the very deep answers, and we will be obviously happy to have more and more questions answered by you in order to help us to build these guidelines, which we believe is really important as a delivery of this project. So for the moment, it's all. Obviously, if you got more questions, please feel free to ask them. And as Julie was saying, we will answer also after this this stakeholder meeting. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Sara. Please liaise with Sara directly or through the chat if you've got some more contributions to make. I'm sure she would be very grateful. Our final speaker, who's a colleague from MINAGRIS, Amila Abenayaka, is going to talk now about the development of a decision support tool for agri-plastic use at the farm level. And again, we'll have a very short session and there'll be a chance to ask some questions afterwards. So over to you, Amila.
Thank you so much, Julie. Yeah, and very good morning for everyone. Yeah, so I'm going to discuss about the decision support tool, which is one of the activity under MINAGRIS project. And I will keep my video camera switch off. Yeah. And can you go back to the first slide? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So here we conduct this activity to make supporting tool to make decisions for agricultural activities, especially focusing on the plastics used in agriculture. And we work with the support of many MINAGRIS partners, including FIBIL Austria and so many others. Yeah, next one, please. Then sustainability in agriculture is essential because the sector has significant environmental, social, and economic impacts. Ensuring sustainable practices is critical for the activities like long-term food security, protecting ecosystem health, and building resilience to climate change and other environmental impacts, etc. And challenges in there are so many challenges in decision making, often raised when trying to balance the productivity with environmental stewardship, manage trade-offs between short-term economic gains and long-term sustainability, and incorporate the diverse priorities of farmers and other stakeholders, including consumers. To address these challenges, we propose to use this kind of decision support tool and with some kind of guidance. Next, please. And this decision support tool, DST, is supposed to help to evaluate sustainable practices and alternatives by providing a structured approach to assess trade-offs and synergies across multiple criteria. And we can see the benefits of using this kind of digital support tool, which will support to have comprehensive analysis. Like for example, DSTs are intended to consider all dimensions of sustainability, like environmental, social, and economic. And environment has there are so many aspects like climate change, plastic pollution, and chemical pollution, eutrophication, so many. And then for data-driven decisions, the aim is to provide evidence-based insights to inform policy and strategic planning, or maybe farm level and other activity decision making. And also this kind of tool providing stakeholder engagements, like for example, by presenting clear and transparent data, DSTs are supposed to encourage collaboration among stakeholders. And then key considerations when designing the DSTs, like accessibility and usability, and also the integration of multiple criteria, and then the transparency in data, methods, and outputs to ensure trust and credibility. Next, please. Yeah, I think like previously many speakers discussed, the plastic is widely used in agriculture, like for example, mulching, irrigation pipes, coated fertilizer. And while they offer certain benefits, they also bring challenges that demand urgent attention, like the degradation, creating micro and nanoplastics, and the other plastic-related chemical associated soil pollution, and impact on soil biodiversity and soil functionality, impacts on certain soil functionalities. And also like the long-term risk, the food safety, environmental health, and ecosystem resilience, etc. And with this, that's a one important aspects of having this kind of decision support tool. Next slide, please. The purpose of our DST is to provide stakeholders, especially the farm level, with a comprehensive way to evaluate the life cycle impacts of plastics and their substitutes in agriculture. I think like Marie-France initially mentioned, like plastic or other products have huge environmental impacts in their early stage of life cycle. So we maybe shouldn't be considering only the end of life stage, but also the impacts associated with the early stage of the life cycle. The DST assess, like for example, like especially in the environmental impacts. However, like if we try to implement the available life cycle assessment approach tools and impact assessment models, like one limitation is those models often they don't include the impacts of micro and nanoplastic pollution. So one goal is, when we developing this kind of tool, so build a method to include the micro nanoplastic pollution into the life cycle impact assessment models, and also see the other impact categories, not only the micro nanoplastic pollution, but also the GHG emissions, water consumption, ecotoxicity, and other impact categories as well. And economic situation is maybe kind of a little bit more dynamic. It can be vary with the policy decisions and other incentives. However, when farm level decisions are made, it is quite important to include the economic viability also into the decision making process. and also social factors, like for example, the labor intensity, etc. Like because of like if you want a lot of labor to, and if it is your alternative product is very heavy and need more labor, etc. So then we need to include such kind of factors as well into the decision making process. So we including the social factors as well. And by addressing these dimensions, the DST is supposed to help farmers and decision makers choose practical and sustainable options for reducing agri-plastic impacts. Next, please. Yeah. As a scientific approach, we are using the multi-criteria decision analysis approach. Why? Because this provide to balance the trade-offs between environmental, social, and different kind of criteria, including in this particular case, the like environmental, social, and economic dimensions considerations. And also yeah, for example, like as I previously mentioned, impacts on soil, water, and the labor activities and the cost, etc. We need to take into consideration in this approach. And anyway, like if you see the right hand side the diagram, you can see the gray big one is existing environmental impact assessment method, like life cycle assessment. So we have so many impact categories, etc. And same time, micro and nanoplastic impacts are huge in this case and more relevant. However, the existing models doesn't include, but in our approach, we will take this into consideration. And then, yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, yeah, this is a kind of a interesting point. These kind of tools require careful balancing stakeholder expectations and also the achievable in the practice, and also the data availability. Like there can be different levels of data availability. Some data may be like pre-production stage kind of things, like fossil fuel extraction, etc. Those are maybe globally available data can be useful. However, like when you go for the specific farms and products, like agricultural products, and then maybe we need to consider the data availability level, like so that can be interesting points to discuss while we developing the tool. And like maybe in this case also, like if you see the right hand side, you can see mostly the stakeholders and everybody's hoping for the unicorn. However, we know like what we trying to achieve is kind of the rhino. Like it's a very common saying in the LCA. So nothing will be perfect. However, we will try to achieve with the available science, and we will advance in certain areas within the science possible way, like including micro nanoplastics impacts. And then we will try to approach the decision support tool development. Yeah, thank you. Next one, please. Yeah, I think in this case also, like maybe we are now moving to the questions, and then next one, please. Yeah, maybe no. Yeah, I think. Thank you. Maybe next. Yeah. 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 So I think one of very important question we are having while developing the tool is what specific farm level decisions would you like the tool to support in relation to agri-plastics? So I think this is one of key questions we come up with when we initiate the process. So if you can add your thoughts, it will be very useful for us. Yeah, I can see like more information to farmers on non-plastic, like alternatives, supply guidelines, removal, sorting, substitute plastic material with natural material. Okay, so the external cost, inclusion of external cost. Okay. So yeah, maybe we can move to the next question. Yeah, the next one is the which key challenges or questions related to agri-plastics do you expect the tool to address? Okay, the disposal options, practicability, cost of alternatives. Yeah, when it comes for the alternatives, cost can be kind of interesting point. Risk of fragmentation due to improper removal. Okay. Mhm. Yeah, I think this is a kind of a new way of thought. Yeah, I'm really happy for some of the response, all of the response, but some make me excited, like risk of fragmentation due to improper removal and disposal. I think maybe the Sara's guidelines will be covering these kind of aspects, like the technology related measures. Yeah, by me it's very useful. Global team impacts of practices, cost. Yeah, maybe a few more seconds, then let's move. Yeah. Okay, the next one is, what do you think about preliminary use of this type of farm level decision support tool? Yeah, mostly the farmers, uh, yeah, local technical advisors. Yeah, I think in the industries as well, they can use this kind of tool to engage with the farmers in certain ways. Okay, so the next one is, what types of agri-plastics, like for example, plastic or biodegradable plastic mulching, should be included in the assessment in the development of the tool? Clips, bands, any other covers, then mulch films. Okay. Uh, Conventional practices and their alternatives, all of them. Yeah. Hydrophilic polymers, irrigation pipes, natural fertilizers like hopefully the compost. Compost also sometimes contaminate with the microplastics. All including equipment. So like even tire wear, etc. I can see lots of interesting answers. Maybe we can move to the next. What specific environmental, social, and economic factors should the tool evaluate? We can see the risk of fragmentation, the risk of pollution, air, soil, water. I think this meant to be micro and nanoplastics related pollution in air, soil, and water. Impacts at different levels. Okay. The benefits of use of agri-plastics. Then how about like other impacts like impacts on climate change, impacts on eutrophication? So shall we move to the next? Okay. Thank you so much. I will hand over to Julie.
Okay. Thanks, Samila. Looks like you had some really useful contributions there. So thanks to everybody. We've reached the end of the planned sessions now. There's going to be a chance to ask a few questions if you want to cast your mind back to some of the early presentations on the policy and the UNEP treaty and the monitoring law, or some of these last sessions as well. Please feel free to raise a hand or pop them in the chat now. I saw, Miriam, you've made a comment there. Is that a question you would like to ask, or just a comment for Emila?
Hi, everyone. This is Miriam. I'm also sick, like some of you.
Sorry. Yes. Just as well, this is online.
More a comment that we see now, water-soluble polymers getting into the attention revision also at the commission level on detergents. And so because a lot of them are used in agriculture too, I think it's good to get the attention onto for following up project. Thank you.
Thank you for raising that. Yes, and Danielle has said the same with hydrophilic polymers as well. It seems like it's a dynamic field. There's a lot to consider, a lot going on. Would anybody else like to raise a point or ask a question of any of our speakers? Last chance. Okay, from Elsa. Have you made an inventory of scientific articles assessing the benefits?
Sorry. Yes. Hello?
Yes.
Can you? Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
I had a comment, perhaps in general, about the when we talk about microplastics. This is always I talk about this in my lectures. It's a very generic term. For instance, when we use a sludge, it was the presentation about the sludge. in the sludge, the microplastics that are in the sludge are not the same like in the water. You know, in the water we have the low density ones, and in the sludge we have the high density ones. So perhaps we should be a bit more more precise on the type of polymer that we are using, because the problems will be different. It's not the same if you have a polyethylene or polypropylene in the water that if you have polystyrene or PET or PVA in the sludge, which is high density. So I think this is a general comment. It's not only for this, but in general, that we should be more specific on the term, because I don't like the term microplastic just itself, just microplastic, because it's like pesticides, you know, it can be everything. So, and I think it's totally different, the problem in the sludge compared to the water, and especially here we are talking about soil, and of course it is another issue. And I think these polymers are behaving totally different. Well, I am chemist by background, and I think this is very important to consider this, all the interactions, all the chemistry, and all the behavior of this, of the materials, you know, that these materials which are different. No? That's my point.
Yeah. Okay, but yeah, a useful point. Does anybody else want to respond to that, or to support it, add any further information?
Well, I can mention. So thank you very much, Damia. He is one of our advisors in MINAGRIS. So thank you very much for this comment. Indeed, the polyethylene is the material that we are finding more in the agricultural systems, together with polypropylene. So he's completely right. I think in the future we need to address more, like saying the impact of polyethylene or the impact of polypropylene on soil biodiversity, for instance. Yeah, indeed. Thank you.
A little bit more robust in our language. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Elsa, there's a question. Have you made an inventory of scientific articles assessing the benefits of agricultural plastics? For example, yield, arduousness.
May I comment on this?
Yes.
Yes, because we do with my team the sustainability analysis. Yes, of course, we did literature research and so on, but I want to mention that we also made a rather longer questionnaire to all of our CSS farmers about exactly asking the questions about sustainability, about economic aspects, about yield, about time, for example, for the season with or without mulch film and so on. So we asked 110 farmers in our 11 CSS over Europe, which is still not representative of Europe, but it's a really good practical information what the farmers think of using these agri-plastic products. So we did this questionnaire and we are analyzing.
Thanks, Ildiko.
Yeah.
Elsa, why did you ask that question? Would you like to elaborate a little bit on it?
Yeah, and may I add something maybe after her? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a bit ill also. Yeah, I was asking this question because, yeah, of course, agri-plastic have impact on the soil and on the environment. But most of the time when I read, I'm not a scientist, when I read scientific papers, I think there's a lack of consideration about the benefits. Farmers don't use plastic because they like that, because it's a real cost for them, and there's a real management when the product are used. And yeah, sometimes I think there's so we are totally aware that we need to measure, to evaluate the impact of our product on the soil and on the human health, but we should not forget why we use agroplastics.
Yeah, good point. Useful to remember that.
I agree with Elsa.
Yeah. And Joelle has put an answer for you. We haven't done a review in MINAGRIS, but relying on other reports, but she reckons it's a good idea as well. What else have we got here?
Yeah, if I may add something on this, and also react on that. Yes, please, if you're aware of articles, as I asked before, of particular interest in this matter, please send the article to us, because they'll be reviewed. We got quite a lot of articles already, the report from Commission, FAO, and all of these reports, so UNEP, but please send us other relevant literature, because we'll need it to build our reports on the good practices. So thanks for your question.
I think we need to have a project on that for the evaluation of the benefits. But there is so much differences between, for example, in melon, in the west of France and the southeast of France, in the yield and the earliness, and that I think it's a really hard data to aggregate.
Yes, it really depends
Yes.
what you compare it to, also, as many mentioned here. So if you are testing plastic, are you testing just the application versus no application at all, or how are you dealing, like, such comparison? And I think there are a lot of studies on particular benefits of using plastics, but if you want to have the full picture in what are the costs also in weeding instead of having a mulch, what are the needs depending on what kind of agriculture you are doing? It's a very complex question. I think in the project Green Resilient, there were some of these things done, but it's always a very case example. So it's hard to extrapolate.
Some of French experimental station tried to compare it at ISO, I don't know how to say that, with the same effort, so that they put mulch, they have to they make effort, they have energy to put the mulch film in place, and then they compare to the time they're gonna limit the time of taking out the adventists. They're gonna take and they're gonna spend the same time on both modality, with and without. They're also gonna use the same amount of phyto product. So yeah, the only little test, little trial I know is at ISO. I don't know how to say that. Sorry, I have to check.
Just write it in the chat afterwards.
At ISO resources, yeah, ISO in time and in economic, yeah.
Good. Any other points you would like to raise or questions you would like to ask?
May I also ask a question as a presenter? I really wonder if any of you, dear audience, because I'm missing this information, has heard about any report, any tests, any scientific paper about the accumulation of biodegradable mulch film in the soil. Because of course we know the standard, it should disappear, but what happens in between these 2 years, and if next season we add again an amount of biodegradable mulch film, if anyone knows anything about this accumulation or seen a research or something, it would be very nice if you could tell me now or contact me. It's a really important issue, because there should be accumulation, but I already talked to some experts, and no one could help me further.
Do you know a project Biomaleg?
Once again, what kind
Biomaleg? Biomaleg, I send the they study on 20 years of using polyethylene on a parcel, and then just biodegradable mulching film on another parcel. So I'll send you the.
Thank you very much.
Any other further information you want to share with us, or you want to get in touch with the speakers, you can do it through the MINAGRIS website, or contact us individually if you have the contact. Okay, I think I'm going to close the meeting here and say thank you so much to our speakers. Really valuable insights there on the treaty and also the monitoring law. Thank you for your contributions. There's obviously a lot going on. And also thank you for your contributions in supporting the MINAGRIS team and in their work. As you can see, there will be a decision support tool, a BREF document and a policy review coming soon. So stay tuned for that. And both projects are going to be very active over the next few months. I know Papillon is finishing by April, where they have their conference. MINAGRIS has another 1.5 years to go. But between us, we're producing a lot of information, publications, videos, blogs. Sign up for newsletters, please. Fact sheets, etc. So please do keep an eye on our website to see what's going on. And thank you so much for joining us. And here's a reminder for the Agri-Food Plus conference as well. Thanks, Charlotte. That's taking place in April in Brussels. There'll be another stakeholder forum associated with that as well. This is the second conference. The first one was in Piacenza, was very successful. So I'd encourage you to register for this. Good. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.